I've been an academic psychologist all of my life. I'm also a practitioner, which I did later in life. And I took 7 years to finish my PhD, which John would be very unhappy about. But in those days, there was no pressure.
If it was full-time enrolment, yes, we'd be.
I was having a lovely time. And it was from 1979 until 1986. And I was having a lovely time. I had a scholarship. It ran out eventually, but I could get lots of money teaching and stuff like that. In fact, in terms of finances, I reckon that was the time of my life that I had the most money in my pocket. Because I had modest needs. I hadn't developed all of my evil tastes at that stage. Yeah. Why did I finish my PhD? Well, mysteriously, my wife became pregnant. And I still not quite. Yeah, anyway, she became pregnant. She was the breadwinner. She was a primary school teacher. Oh, well, this is good. She's pregnant. I continued doing my stuff. She stopped work. No, that's all right. I continued doing my stuff. The bank balance went to zero. Must get a job. So that's when I began my academic career. And it's been relatively random. I was talking before to Moira, the things that have happened to me in life are to some extent random. You know, you work, an opportunity comes, you take it, it may be the correct decision, the wrong, whatever, life leads you. So I'm fairly non-traditional in the way that my career has developed. But I want to tell you some of the things that I thought important for me, and also some of the things that I would do differently if I was starting again. So one of the things, I have 130 publications. I have several $1 million of grant income that I can sort of claim I'm associated with and so on. But I wouldn't consider myself a mainstream researcher by any means. And I've just been driven by curiosity. So that's what's driven me. No particular plan, just things are interesting and I work on them and some publications happen or a grant happens and so on. One of the things, however, that I did early in life was decide what sort of academic I was going to be. And I made the decision to be a balanced academic. So, you know, in the superannuation scheme you choose, you know, conservative or balanced or whatever. I decided I would be balanced. And so I wanted to be a person who contributed well in the classroom and who also did research and also contributed to administration. And part of that was curiosity driven too. I was just interested in what is a university and how the hell does it work and who makes decisions and so on. So I took opportunities to do all sorts of different teaching and to serve on different committees and do all sorts of different coordination jobs and do some research as well. And that was a decision that I've made and I've held to. So there were times in my life where I could have gone totally to the dark side of research, abandoned teaching and become full-time, serious sort of research, and I resisted that. I wanted to be someone who contributed across the range of things, and that's me. But it's a decision that you probably have to make at some stage. Where are you going to put your energies? Are you going to spread them across a range of things or focus on one particular thing or not? So that was me. I decided that I'd have a little bit of everything because otherwise other people might be getting better stuff. I'm just kidding, I don't know. Early on I decided that in contributing in research, I would have an aim to publish 5 papers a year. And I got that from talking to my PhD supervisor. I said, what's sort of, and that was basically his aim. I reckon if you get 5 a year, you're doing pretty well. And I calculated last night, I've actually averaged a little over 4 a year. So, you know, I've sort of held to that reasonably well. And it's all about quantity, not about quality, which I'll talk about later. And how did I do that? I have now on my computer, it used to be on paper, a list of papers to write, and it's still there. And it's getting longer and longer because there's less and less time for me to do research these days. And probably not a lot of time in the future. And in fact, I went to a professional development workshop on the weekend and found myself writing down another idea, which is added to the list and may not be something that will be done. But I've always got a list of things that I'm going to be doing, the next paper to be written, the next thing to be done, and so on. And I review that periodically and see how it's going. That list is really useful because every now and again students turn up and say, no, I want to do something, but I'm not really sure. And you can go to your list and say, how about this one or that one or whatever. So set yourself a target and review periodically how you're going about achieving your sort of target and so on. Second thing that I decided with my career is that in line with wanting to do a bit of everything, it's probably the severe toilet training I got as a child. I decided I needed to be useful. I needed to have a skill that other people wanted. And in my case, that was developing some skills in analysis and particularly in psychometrics, evaluating measurement tools and so on. That was what I decided that would be my skill. And I observed that that would be a useful skill that a whole range of people might want to take from me. And so that is something that I've been able to offer to people, that I developed and that I've been able to offer people and collaborate with people over the years. So I decided that it wasn't possible to have a good research career by being a lone ranger, or it wasn't going to be possible for me, but I needed to have a skill that I could add to other people's skills so that together we could do stuff. And that's something that I'd encourage you guys to think about as well. What is it that you're going to have that you can offer to other people and work together with them? Some other things related to that were a decision early on that I was not going to be expensive. So my PhD research involved animal research, and that involved having space and equipment and food for the animals and buying the animals and animal ethics committees and all sorts of horrible stuff. And it was wonderful work to do in my PhD, but it was a whole lot of resources, and I knew if I moved somewhere else, I couldn't possibly regenerate those sort of resources. It would be really hard for me to do. So I decided that whatever I was going to focus on had to be something that didn't cost a whole lot of money. That was a decision that I made. I also decided early on that whatever I did had to be relevant and useful, because my PhD wasn't. My PhD was, I really loved doing it. My PhD topic was social entrainment of circadian oscillators in rodents. And people have been beating down my doors since saying, please tell us what you discovered about social entrainment of circadian oscillators in rodents. It was a fascinating little question. It was really good. I loved doing it. But at the time I was doing it, one of the ways that I put bread on the table was to do some contract research for a professor in the department. And this was research that involved circadian rhythms, involved shift workers adapting to situations. And one of the contracts I worked on involved going out and interviewing shift workers in the State Electricity Commission in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria, where they dug coal to make electricity. These people were claiming that they were dying younger because they were working shift work, and management claimed that they weren't dying younger, but if they were, well, they didn't need more money in their pay package because they weren't going to live as long. So not a lot of electricity was getting delivered to Victoria at the time because there was industrial disputation, and they sent down me to talk to these people. And people older than my father were asking my advice. And I found that really fantastic. You know, there was something that I'd learned that might be useful to someone else, that could help someone else. So that was an early decision of mine, that whatever I did had to be relevant in the real world, and that was going to motivate me, that I could feel I was doing something useful in the world. Next thing that I think was important in my career was partnering with people. And there are a number of people who had a big influence on me early on. One was my fourth year supervisor, who was, and still is, has the most childlike enthusiasm I've ever seen. Every time I meet him, he's older than I am, every time I meet him I feel course, here's this man who's just enthusiastic about stuff and ideas and new things and so on. And I learned that from him, and also learned from him that having 10 ideas, 9 of which were absolutely stupid, was okay, provided every now and again you had a good idea. So my own personality is to be safe and sensible, but he wasn't safe and sensible at all. He just threw out weird and wonderful ideas, and every now and again something really good would come up, and I learned something from him. Another person I partnered with a little bit later on was a man whose intellect probably I admire most in the whole world. He's the most intelligent person I've ever met, but you wouldn't notice it. He's one of those academics who you wonder how he learned to tie his shoelaces. But very, very clever man. And he taught me how to write. And his native language is not English. He learned English when he came to Australia when he was 13 or 14. And his English is still very accented and so on. But I decided to work with him because I really admired his intellect. And I learned from him how to write, because I would write, a paper and give it to him. And then we would sit down and spend a long time over each sentence. It drove me crazy. But I learned so much about writing from this man whose native language was not English, but he taught me about communicating precisely ideas in writing. And I'm sure if he read the stuff that I write now, he'd be very disappointed that it didn't work. Another thing that's worked for me, and it was partly a random sort of thing, is to work across disciplines. So when my wife mysteriously became pregnant and her back balance went to 0, my first job was at Lincoln Institute of Health Science, where I was in a psychology department that service taught into allied health disciplines. And most of my PhD students, a lot of my collaborators have been people from other disciplines, from occupational therapy, nursing, speech pathology, and so on. Now, I had some skills that I could offer them in terms of analysis and research design and so on, but they had really interesting real-world problems. And I was just curious. It didn't matter whether it was psychology or not. There was just a problem to be solved that I could work together with them doing. And that has always been really exciting for me, hearing a problem from another discipline and thinking about that, not knowing that discipline in great detail, but providing some insight, and they go, no, that's stupid. Oh, hang on. Maybe that does make sense. The sort of creative sparking that occurs is really good. And I mentioned before that I've got an NHMRC grant that's finishing up at the moment that involves acupuncture and cognitive behaviour therapy. At RMIT, in the school that I led there, was Chinese medicine. And I've been reading some stuff in psychology about treating depression. And cognitive behaviour therapy is a method of treating depression that has a good evidence base. But there's also drugs that you can take to treat depression that have a good evidence base as well. And I had always thought that you couldn't combine the two, they're quite different. Cognitive behaviour therapy basically involves taking a depressed person and saying, maybe your depression comes from inside. Maybe if we could change the way you think about things, you wouldn't be depressed anymore. Whereas drug therapy is more like, just pop the pill, it'll be fine, the depression. So one says, you need to change yourself a little bit. The other says, take this external agent. But there was evidence in the literature that the combination of the two actually worked quite well. And I was curious about that. And I remember having a chat with the head of Chinese medicine about this particular thing. And it was just a chat. So I'm reading this stuff like that, I don't get it. And out of that chat came, why don't we combine acupuncture and CBT together for tension headache? Both have some degree of evidence base that they're successful. Acupuncture works relatively quickly, but you need to keep doing it to have an effect. CBT takes longer, but has a longer lasting effect. So the idea was that it might work together. And that was just throwing out an idea, chatting it to a person in a different discipline and coming up with something, the sort of exercise we were talking about before. Next thing that I decided to do that I think is important is to use your students very well. So if you look at my CV, a whole lot of the first authors are students of mine. And I've had more than 40 PhD students that I've worked with over the years. That's a good way to do your work because you get points for having PhD students. I mean, it's part of the academic job. And for me, it's a really great part of the academic job. Unlike 600 anonymous faces, most of whom I can't see anymore as my vision deteriorates, in a first year class, students you work with for a period of years, you get to know them, they become friends and so on. It's an enjoyable social interaction and you can really watch someone develop over time and then they divorce you. It's terrible. But use your students and treat them well. Treat them well because you get the best out of them and be really upfront. An interaction with me with a prospective student is, it's going to be really useful for you to keep me interested. The thing that interests me is publications. Why don't we do some publications along the way? And so we'll have those explicit sort of discussions about what we might be able to do together that relates to their PhD and it's good for their career and good for my career and so on as well. And those relationships with students continue, a number of them. That they end up divorcing you just before they submit, but you make friends again afterwards. And then you can become lifetime friends. Do stuff that's interesting and fun. I've never lost my passion for dealing with a problem and coming up with an idea and I just love seeing my name in print. It's really good. I love publishing. What would I do differently? At one stage, I developed some international links. I got involved in an international association and we had conferences every 2 years and meet the same people. I met the people whose work I was reading. That was really good. But for whatever reason, it didn't continue. If I had my time again, I'd work harder at developing international links. For myself, if I did it again, I'd be more focused. If you look at my CV, it's all over the shop. And when I have to describe who I am, I'm never quite certain who I am because sometimes I'm a speech pathologist and sometimes I'm an OT and I've worked on a whole range of things. If I had my time again, I'd focus more on quality than on quantity. It probably worked for me, but it wouldn't work so much now. Now quality is more important than quantity, I think. If I had my time again, I'd focus more on industry links and working with problems where I could attract support from industry. I'd probably be less opportunistic if I did it again. It just comes back to the thing of being more focused. And I've done an amount of consulting in my life, which was largely to make money. But if I did it again, I'd get more publications, I'd get more research bang out of that consultancy work that I did. And the other thing I'd do is move more often. I stayed at one university for 18 years and I got stale. And every time I've moved, I've become 10 years younger. I'm going to need nappies any day now.